Nintendo, especially with their Switch 2, seem to have gotten quite a bit of hate during the launch. People didn't like the price, which I understood. Not used to seeing Nintendo with such a large price tag. Definitely not used to seeing Nintendo with price tags close to what we see from the current gen. I will say, I've said this before, I've had my Switch 2 now for uh 2 months. Yeah, better part of 2 months, I want to say, maybe a little less. And pleased with it. Very happy. Have not owned a console. The last console I purchased for me, or had purchased for me, it was a gift, was the Xbox 360. It's been a long time. Now, I've said this before. I've bought consoles for my sons. I think the last console I bought for my sons before they started purchasing things for themselves was the Xbox One and the PlayStation 4, if I'm not mistaken. But what I have found with the advent of the Switch 2 is that there are many people that just seem to want this thing to fail. So I want to read some stats off for you just to give you, I guess, kind of an idea of what ballpark we're in for these numbers that came out for the Switch 2, which are crazy. So I'm going to read off to you the PlayStation sales numbers for its first year for each of the consoles. In 1994, the PS1 launched and it sold 700,000 units first year. PS2 launched in 2000 and it sold 1.4 million units in its first year. That went on to be the top selling console of all time, I think 160 million units. The PlayStation 3, which launched in 2006, sold 3.6 million units. As the PlayStation gains more and more popularity, people love it. They have good third-party support. Their hardware is typically the best. People are pleased. In 2013, the PlayStation 4 launched, 7.6 million units sold in its first year. In 2020, the PS5 launched, 7.8 million units in its first year. Those are great numbers. Now, for comparison, we'll go back to the Xbox. The original Xbox launched in 2001. I remember that. I was still in the military at the time. Uh, in its first year, it sold 1.4 million units. Actually, it says units within the first few weeks of initial launch, but did they give the first year? There aren't widely published details for the first year total. So if I had to guesstimate, I'd say maybe like 2 or 3 million first year, maybe 2 million first year for Xbox. Still, it was probably within those same numbers of PlayStation because PlayStation just dominated the market for so long. The Xbox 360, which I bought one of those, it says in the first calendar year sold 1.5 million. So that original number is probably correct. And Xbox One in 2013, 3 million units sold worldwide in its first year. Xbox Series S and or X and S, 6.5 million units by mid 2021. So these are some good numbers. Now let's get to this article. And this, for me, I'm gonna tell you what this says. This says that despite the hate that it got for a variety of reasons, some legitimate reasons that people had reservations about the Nintendo Switch 2, game key cards being one of them. A couple other things. The price, people thought it should be less expensive. The price of some of the cartridges are pretty crazy, but I've made this point before. If you look back in history, $70 cartridges, especially for Nintendo, and not just Nintendo, aren't abnormal. You can go back to the 90s and find some games that were that price. Anyway, Nintendo Switch 2 is officially the company's best-selling console as sales top 17 million. Not just the best-selling console for Nintendo, this is the fastest selling console of all time in the first year. You saw those numbers from those other consoles. They're not even close to these numbers right here. This is crazy. And the estimate is that these are the units that were sold to the distributors and the units that were actually sold physically to people from those distributors, about 15 million, which is still crazy. And we're not even in a full year into the console. This is nuts. So this is from Yahoo Finance. Nintendo revealed its Nintendo Switch 2 console has sold more than 17 million units since release last June. Think about that. Think about how many more months we have until June. That'll be a full year. Yo, it's especially with the games that's coming out. I'm telling you right now, like I'm excited for Pragmata. I haven't picked up Final Fantasy Intergrade yet, but I might buy that digitally. That I played through the demo. That game is great. The new Dragon Quest, Lord willing, I'm definitely buying that one. That game is fire. I played that demo and I was hooked the entire time. So it says console 17 million units since release last June, and it's on track to hit 19 million by the end of March. Now we'll see. I would say it'd be a tall order to reach 19 million, but if it keeps up this same pace, yo, the numbers are probably going to be crazy. 19 million is definitely doable at this pace. I think that's a good number for them to shoot for or to try to attain by this coming June. It says during that same period, the original Nintendo Switch has sold 3.25 million units, down 66% compared to the previous year, obviously because the Switch 2 released mid last year. Now, here's the thing. The original Switch has become Nintendo's top selling console of all time, 155 million units. It passed, I believe it was the DS was before it. I think that held the record before that, like 154 million or something like that. These are crazy numbers, especially when you look for all looking at all the metrics. I mean, it's not like people have a bunch of disposable income to be buying things. So the fact that the Switch 2 sold this much, it's kind of crazy. Like this is really, really insane. And they did a really good job with their supply chain. I think they went overboard making sure they had enough units. I don't think they anticipated selling as much as they did, but it's a good thing Nintendo prepared because they're moving a lot of units. I tried to buy a Switch 2 launch day. I'd saved up the money. I was prepared. I was excited for it. Every website I went to, everywhere I tried to buy, crash. I could not pick that thing up. My kids wound up buying me one for Christmas. So, it all worked out in the wash. But these are a lot of units. It says, in its last quarterly earnings results released Tuesday, the Japanese video game giant says that it sold 7 million Switch 2 consoles during its most recent quarter, which ended in December alone. The Switch is now officially Nintendo's fastest selling game console ever. Nintendo maintains its previous forecast of 19 million Nintendo Switch consoles sold by March 31st, which will mark the end of Nintendo's current fiscal year. Okay, so they're going with the fiscal year. Overall, Nintendo reported 1.9 trillion Japanese yen in its first 3 quarters of fiscal year 2026, which ran April 1st, 2025 to December 31st, 2025, and profits of 358.8 billion yen. Those stats are up 99.3% and 51.3% respectively. And the funny thing is, like, I pay attention to a lot of what's going on, and I'm not going to make it seem like I'm some financial guy that's paying attention to all of this, but I've heard all of the things people have been saying about Nintendo oh, they're on the ropes. This is bad. And I don't know what's going on, right? Like I'm not in that space. So I'm watching that like, yo, that's crazy, man. Nintendo's about to have some troubles. That's wild. Meanwhile, I'm pleased with my Switch 2, and I'm seeing a bunch of people pleased with their Switch 2. So I don't know, like I'm kind of confused. Like, all right, maybe I just don't understand this. Maybe that's what the problem is. But now seeing this, I think a lot of the stuff I was reading is, well, I don't think I know they were wrong. Clearly, the Nintendo Switch 2 is doing very well, and Nintendo in general is doing very well. Nintendo says it sold 37.9 million Switch 2 games and 108.9 million Switch titles during the physical year, including more than 14 million copies of Switch 2 release title Mario Kart World and 4.25 million of Donkey Kong Bananza. Yo, translation of this is Nintendo is like actually in a good space. This doesn't like nothing about this. I can't read this and somehow draw the conclusion that, oh, yeah, Nintendo's down bad. They're just not doing good. That I don't find that to be the case. And then it goes on to say Nintendo Switch 2 record sales contrast with a recent share price weakness. And I think that's due to a lot of things. People are anticipating the price of the Switch 2 going up because of the RAM shortage, which Nintendo has said, some different things about that, different things that they can do to kind of mitigate that. So I can't say what's going to happen with that. Like I said, I'm not in that space, critiquing the financials of companies. All I can say is I have been having lots of fun with my Switch 2. When I tell you I have enjoyed it, I have enjoyed all the games I've been playing. I appreciate the fact that there's a lot of third-party support. Like there's a lot more third-party support than I ever saw for the Switch 1 or the original Switch. Not that they didn't get third-party support at all, but some of those big titles just never made it there. When I watched the Video Game Awards and saw that Pragmata was coming to the Switch 2, I'm not gonna lie, I was kind of shocked. I was like, I didn't think that game was possible. Was that before? No, this was after I'd already had my Switch 2. I just wasn't expecting that. I will tell you, playing that Final Fantasy VII and playing some other games like Metroid Prime, I'm like, nah, this thing has more juice than a lot of people know. Kudos to Nintendo. They're doing some good things.